Hey folks, guess what's next? The whole tone scale. So, the next few scales that we're going to look at to wrap up our work for today are not considered diatonic modal scales, but rather some other types of scales I'd like you to be familiar with. The first is called the whole tone scale, and this one is actually pretty straightforward. It's all whole steps all the time. And if we take a look at score example 5 in the guide, we will see an example of this scale being used in a Mozart piece. What I'd like for us to do before we listen to the excerpt is to write out the G whole tone scale. I'll show you how I'll do this. Whole, 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 whole. And check out what happens here. We've got a G, an A, a B, a C, a D, and an E. The next note should be F, right? But actually, think about it. It would be F double sharp. So at some point with the whole tone scale, you're going to skip a letter. Let's listen to what it sounds like. You could choose to write it either in the way I have done it, or you can use any enharmonic spelling you like. If you wanted to write it with a D flat rather than a C sharp, and an E flat rather than a D sharp, or an F natural rather than an E sharp. I wrote it this way because I'm going to relate it to the Mozart example. You can see that Mozart spells it in the way I spelled it down on the staff with the C sharp and the D sharp and the E sharp. So I'm going to play an excerpt of this movement that uses it. It's from a piece he titled A Musical Joke. And his use of the whole tone scale happens at the end of the movement in an extended solo section called a cadenza for solo violin. And the scale makes it sound unusual, perhaps even ridiculous, given the style of the day. I'll point out where it happens. Our next example is even clearer in terms of how it sounds. This is score example 6, a piece by Debussy. The scale that is being used here is the E whole tone scale. Please pause the video, write the scale, and then resume playing the video to check your work. Here's how I spelled the E whole tone scale. I used F sharp, G sharp, A sharp, and then skipped B because we have an enharmonic whole step between A sharp and C. I'll show you another way you could have spelled this scale. Like so, with flats instead of the sharps. In general, it's probably good to choose either sharps or flats, but honestly, it doesn't make any difference to me. When you're looking at scores, however, you need to be open-minded. It could be notated either way. So now let's take a look at score example 6 and listen to the excerpt. The whole tone scale has a kind of otherworldly sound to it. I have two more examples of the whole tone scale I'd like to explore. Before we listen to audio example 13, I would like for you to write out the F-sharp whole tone scale. Please pause the video and resume playing when you're ready to check your answer. I notated it with sharps since the starting note was F sharp, and I skipped B, again getting that enharmonic whole step between A sharp and C. This is what the scale sounds like. Now we'll listen to its use in audio example 13, Kraftwerk's Space Lab. Our last example, we'll use the C whole tone scale. Pause the video, write the scale, resume playing once you're ready to check your answer. I used sharps again for this one, but you would feel free to use G flat, A flat, B flat instead of F sharp, G sharp, A sharp. Here's what it sounds like. Now let's listen to the use of the C whole tone scale in audio example 14, a piano piece by Bela Bartók. That concludes our whole tone scale examples. Whole tone scales are less fussy than the other modal scales we've studied because the spelling can be flexible.